Indian coffee is transitioning from shade-grown coffee to sun-grown coffee. When I realized that every cup of coffee that I was drinking was contributing to the loss of biodiversity, that just didn't sit well inside me. So I started Black Bazaar Coffee Company. The purpose of Black Bazaar Coffee is to transform the way the world grows and sells coffee and to make biodiversity important in that picture. So the next time you drink coffee, pick it up, turn it around, and look for the label that says it's biodiversity friendly. My story with coffee began when I was a PhD student studying the impacts of coffee on biodiversity. Halfway through my PhD, I found myself knee-deep in mud, having an existential crisis. One evening, I was sitting with Kumar on his 20-acre coffee farm in a tiny village in Coorg. We were talking about coffee, and he was telling me that he was nervous about how much longer he would be able to sustain his farm. His coffee was suffering because of rainfall, increasing pests, and disease. While we were talking, his 80-year-old mother came and sat down beside me. She held one hand up and placed the other on her hip and said, "I told you not to cut down the trees." Everywhere else in the world, forests were cleared to grow coffee. And this is because the yield of coffee is actually the highest when you grow coffee under the sun. In India, we have by and large grown coffee under the shade of forest trees. Trees protect coffee plants from hot, dry summers, and trees also support biodiversity. But since the 1970s onwards, more and more farms have been removing trees in the hope of increasing their productivity. So as we speak, Indian coffee is transitioning from shade-grown coffee to sun-grown coffee. When I realized that every cup of coffee that I was drinking was contributing to the loss of biodiversity, that just didn't sit well inside me. And suddenly, getting a PhD out of it wasn't enough. My PhD manuscript would have been, at best, read by 3 people. 2 examiners and my mother, if I were lucky. But I wanted to create a movement for coffee that reached out to thousands and thousands of people, from farmers to coffee drinkers. And so I started Black Bazaar Coffee Company. The purpose of Black Bazaar Coffee is to transform the way the world grows and sells coffee and to make biodiversity important in that picture. And to do that, we realized that we would have to disrupt the entire coffee supply chain. At the farm level, Black Bazaar Coffee has conditional agreements with farmers. Farms keep a minimum number of trees, a minimum diversity of trees, and use no chemical pesticides. In return, Black Bazaar Coffee guarantees a buyback of coffee, has long-term relationships to provide secure and guaranteed market access, provides biodiversity price premiums, and supports growers to improve the quality of their produce. We started this project 2 years ago, which is a blink of an eye in ecological timescales, but we're already seeing an impact. We see nature creeping back into these coffee farms. We see wildlife, trees, and vegetation making a rapid comeback. At the consumer level, it's much more challenging. Disrupting people's ideas about what kind of coffee they drink is very difficult. But the idea has been to get people to aspire to drink biodiversity-friendly coffee in the same way they aspire to drink limited edition, imported coffees from Brazil, Colombia, and Costa Rica. So we also created a biodiversity label. This is a label or a stamp of guarantee that tells every coffee drinker who picks up that coffee exactly how it's been grown. So today, I can walk into a cafe that serves biodiversity-friendly coffee or simply buy coffee stamped with this label off a supermarket shelf. Coffee farming has no doubt left significant negative impacts. But the solution is not to stop drinking coffee. I think we would all agree that if we stopped drinking coffee, it could lead to the rapid economic and creative downfall of all mankind. The solution is for us to become conscious coffee drinkers and make the right choices about where our coffee comes from and how it's grown. And the biodiversity label gives people a simple way to make these choices. In India today, we have 300,000 coffee farmers, the majority of them being small growers. We consume 115 megatons of coffee annually. That's about 6 billion double-shot cappuccinos a year. So that's the potential scale of our impact also. Today, I work with 5 farms, and we've produced enough coffee for about 150,000 cappuccinos. In the next 5 years, my vision is to have at least 20% of these 6 billion cappuccinos to come from farms that are following biodiversity-friendly practices. When I tell people about what I do, a lot of them say that I didn't need a PhD from Cambridge if all I was going to do was return to India and sell coffee. But this is not about selling coffee. This is about taking ownership of what goes into the coffee that we drink. And there are 3 ways of taking ownership. As farms, we can continue to grow coffee under the shade of trees and reach out to people like Black Bazaar Coffee that can support that process. As individual coffee drinkers, we can all commit to drinking coffee that's been labeled as biodiversity friendly. And as a community, we can push our favorite coffee brands or our local cafes to go out and source coffee that's been coming from farms that are following good practices. This is not new, and it's not impossible. There are plenty of stories from across the world where consumer activism has brought about change. We have collectively demanded soaps and shampoos that are labeled and that are free of animal testing. We have protested and prohibited children workers from working in firecracker factories. And we can do the same for coffee. Here's the chance, I think, to spark a movement. A movement that makes biodiversity-friendly coffee not the exception, but the household default. In India today, we still have the potential to do something before trees or biodiversity disappear from coffee farms forever. And ultimately, coffee drinkers can step forward to bring about that huge difference. So the next time you drink coffee, pick it up, turn it around, and look for the label that says it's biodiversity friendly. Thank you.